Welcome back to another episode of the Student of the Game podcast. I am your host, Kyle Spain, and each time I get on here, it just keeps on getting better. Another special guest on here with me today has at least 28 years of experience in the collegiate sports area, specifically basketball. He coached at Cal Poly, Sacramento State, San Diego State, where he recruited me, Cal Berkeley, Oregon State, Grand Canyon University, and is now back in the lovely San Diego State. Like I said, the man who brought me on and now proud to be an Aztec. Welcome, my man, Greg Gottlieb. How is it
Thank you
going,
for
my
having
man?
me. Thank you for having me, Kyle.
Man, well,
Great to
thank
be
you for
out,
coming on, man.
right?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is actually one of my favorite. When I was really excited to get on here. Just time flies so quickly, and now we're here. And with all the experience that you have there, I'm sure this is going to be a lovely episode for the youth. To get some more insight on how to be a better basketball player, and maybe how to get a D1 scholarship, right? Why don't you start off, Gottlieb, and tell me, how you got started in basketball and what led you to, your first coaching gig at Cal Poly.
I'm going to try and do my best to condense this answer here.
Yeah,
But I grew up when I was born in Manhattan, Kansas. My dad was an assistant coach at the time at Kansas State with a Hall of Fame coach named Jack Hartman. And so I was kind of born into the basketball world, let's say. My dad was a college coach for about 20 years. And we moved to California when I was about 9. And he took a job at Long Beach State with another Hall of Fame coach named Tex Winter, who eventually was with the Lakers and the Bulls, and Phil Jackson, kind of the guy that invented the triangle offense. So, that basketball background, I grew up with my dad was my coach. He got out of coaching right around the time I turned, I think, 10. And he started coaching AAU basketball, wanted to coach myself and then my younger brother as we came up. And he recruited in AAU like he did as a college coach, which at the time people weren't really doing. And we
yeah,
had some very good teams. Went and competed against some of the top teams in the country. At that time AAU basketball was you actually had to be invited to be on the team. That now there's a
yeah,
team for everybody, right? It's become more of a moneymaker. But nonetheless, that's how we got started. And then after my brother and I graduated, my dad kept coaching AAU basketball, and then he also started a service where he helped kids that were not being recruited or overlooked a little bit. And he helped with using his recruiting contacts to try and help kids be placed, whether it was Division 1, 2, 3, NAIA. So, and
I see.
up as a kid, like I said, with some of those tournaments, my dad, this was way before they probably started these rules because of people like my dad, but he would recruit. And we'd have some, you didn't play all year round like it is now. You'd play, certain big tournaments in the spring, and then the summer was pretty all of July. And so we'd bring kids in from out of the area, sometimes out of state, et cetera. And they would all stay at my house. So my house in the summer and in the spring, there's always people sleeping on the couch or in all the rooms. And mom was like everybody's mom for the month. And we always had a full house. And I really enjoyed, that brotherhood. And that really became, those people that I grew up playing with became family. And I think we were talking off camera before about this. When the ball stops, you don't know what else to do, and a lot of it is because you put so much time and energy into basketball, and it's all you know. And so,
Absolutely.
I was very hesitant when I was a kid growing up. I didn't like the fact that we had moved a handful of times, and I didn't want that lifestyle in my mind. And so I was kind of always against it. So when I was a senior in college at Drake, the head coach, Rudy Washington, said, I know you want to be a coach. And at the time I said, I don't know what I want to do, but I know what I don't want to do. I don't want to be
Yeah,
a coach, and I don't want to go to grad school because I am tired of going to school. Like I'm ready to do something. Well,
yeah.
the next year I was coaching and in grad school. So, like funny things happen that way. But, that year, 95, I went to the Final Four and UCLA won it that year. I had started off at UCLA, then transferred to Drake. So I knew some people at UCLA. And then my sister had been a cheerleader there. So we all went up to Seattle for the Final Four, and you're around the coaches convention and you realize like, wow, I know all these people. And everyone, there seemed to be a brotherhood and some camaraderie among coaches. And, all of a sudden my mind changed. Like, oh, wow, this could be fun to be a coach. Like you look at all the some of the glamorous stuff, but I always like the relationship aspect too. So, and really, the way I got the job is really not that different now than it was then. And they had a third assistant position at the time, which you weren't allowed to recruit. It was called restricted earnings, and there was a maximum amount of money you could earn. And Cal Poly didn't even have enough money to put any. It was a volunteer position, so that ruled out a lot of candidates right away. Well, they had one game the previous season, and the new coach came in, and he obviously needed to get some guys. And I think he was smart enough to see that if he hired me, that he'd have access to my dad's players, and so which he did, and we ended up recruiting a handful of kids that had played for my dad. And the first year we won 16 games, which was the largest turnaround at the time in Division One that year. We were the most improved team. So that's really kind of how I got my entry into it. And I think everybody has to figure out what their angle is and opportunity. Yeah, I really early on I tried really hard to try and establish my own identity and not always
Hmm.
be so connected directly to my dad, but at the same time, and again, everybody has a different jumping off point to get a job, and it's really hard. This is a finite business. There's more opportunities than now than there were then. There was only 300 teams when I first started. There's 350 or something, but there's also now, instead of having three assistant coaches, people have a staff of six assistants, and you can still have other non-coaching positions. So there's definitely more opportunity, but it's still very
Hmm.
finite. So you got to use whatever opportunities you have to get your foot in the door, and then you got to create value once you're there. So, and I think the interesting thing, Kyle, whether it's basketball or any other profession, as we're talking again off camera, we were talking about, what do you do after? I think there's two things that happen, and I think it's interesting being part of university system for as many years I have, and been at really really good academic schools. And I think that people that at the really good academic schools, probably the most of what you do is you learn how to teach yourself things. Like, you don't
Okay.
know, you have to learn how to figure
Yeah.
things out. But I do think the thing that's really missing in today's educational system is, no one teaches you how to get a job. Like, they don't know,
Exactly.
like, knowing how to get a job and how to do a job. Those are two separate things, right? And you need
Absolutely.
different skills for both of those. There's no classes that really teach you that. I mean, a resume building workshop at this point, that's not going to get you a job. But you got to figure out what, in each industry, getting a job is different too. Like, it's not a cookie cutter where to be in this industry you need to be doing this, to do this industry you need to do that. So, but we all know that in today's world, like, you're not going to get a job by just applying through any one of these job sites and send your resume. That's just going to, you know now you're never going to separate yourself, and that's not how people get jobs, despite the advertisements.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll elaborate a little bit more. I mean, we're kind of just going to bounce a little bit around because you've kind of like, provoked some thoughts. And so, kind of, dabbling with, what we were talking about off camera, this is exactly what this program is designed to do, is to encourage and to educate and share information with athletes to prepare themselves for off the court matters and transitioning. And so, what do you think that the athletes now, especially at the collegiate level, should be doing to prepare themselves for life off the court with your experience?
Sure. I think the first thing is general awareness. I think right now you put so much effort and time into developing your game, and obviously on the men's side, especially if you get to a certain level, everyone has aspirations of being an NBA player, and some of this is real, and some of it also, now that you can make money in college, that is also real. So it makes sense that you put a lot of time into it, but I do think there needs to be a general awareness of what other opportunities are out there. The ones that are smart enough to take advantage of the fact that you are coming into contact with boosters who have have had success in other areas of life, and picking their brain to find out, well, what are you doing, and how did that work out for you, or why are you afforded this extra money to be able to donate to the program, or why these people choose, after they've made money, they like the association of being around athletics. But those are opportunities. Obviously, I don't know how realistic it is to do an internship while you're in college, but those are, I think that, what I noticed that people, is, when you're doing internships, allows you to get experience and develop contacts when it doesn't cost the companies that much money, but it gives you an opportunity to get to know people and also get up close and see how things work. I think that's the hardest part for most student athletes, but definitely, in men's basketball and football, especially when, your people are doing things for you or making life easier for you. And yes, you're working hard towards your, on your body or on your game and all that. But there's other times when, you got to learn to be more self-sufficient. And that's what some of the normal students have to do, and yet even that, I mean, I had last year we created a social media internship through the communications department at San Diego State. And
Yeah, I heard about that.
we added a bunch of kids to help in our, we called it our social media mafia. It was a fun group of kids, and I interviewed probably 20 kids. We ended up taking 8 to 10 kids, and I was, in one hand, I was really impressed with overall the character of the kids, but on the other hand, their preparation coming into our meeting, I thought, showed that they're not educated, and in terms of the same thing I just talked about how to get a job. So for example, if you're meeting with somebody, you should do a little research on the people you're meeting with and the program, as opposed to showing up.
Yes.
I heard about this, it was fun. And who are you? What's your name? Instead, they should look you up and figure out a couple of things about you. I was looking into doing some mentoring, some other mentoring outside of basketball. Like where you're really with a big time guy that someone introduced me to that had a business, and it's really professional coaching, and
Yes.
so one of the things I did in preparation was I realized that the guy that I was interviewing wrote a book, and it wasn't a long book. It was like 70 pages, maybe something like that. And but before I did the interview, I read the book, and it gave me some things I referred to his book a couple of times in the meeting, and it was, for the guy, it really resonated with him. I was able to make a
Yeah.
strong impression on him because we were able to find things that we were familiar, or I could refer to those things, and I understood where he was coming from a little bit more. And so it was really, again, as someone who's in higher education, my thing is not, I try and develop the whole person, not just the player, regardless.
Yes.
I've always tried to help not just the players on our team, but anybody associated with our program. So if it's a younger staff member coming up, try and mentor them. If it's the student manager, same thing. I try and help them. And I could use examples at San Diego State. There's a bunch of them who I helped them, and some went into coaching, some went into other parts, different careers. But trying to mentor them and giving them some advice. And so like, to me, like social media, a lot of these kids, they were interested in things that had to do with social media long term. And I'd say, well, if they did some research on us ahead of time, they might realize that my brother had a national radio show, and that might be a talking point for someone who's a communications major and wants to go into that field, right?
Yeah.
So those are areas where, like, you would like to try and help everybody. I always call it the graduation revelation. And that is, I think you probably, if I said some of these things to you while you were playing, it might not have made it that much sense because it wasn't directly applicable. But
Yeah.
5 years later, when you're done, all these things we were just talking about, they're very specific. And you're like, you're right. I need to do that right now. And so, but I don't think that's necessarily just athletes. I think it's kids in general. But
Absolutely.
obviously I'm around athletes, so I want to help them. And nothing makes me more happy than guys that move on. And I've been doing this, actually, this is my 31st season, and it's awesome.
First season. Okay.
31. And I think I have guys that are coaching, but I have guys that are doing all kinds of other things. And to me, it's just fun to see people that have grown up and whatever, that have families now, or what all the different things that they're doing with their lives. And
Yeah.
know that you played some small role in kind of giving them some tools, to be successful, not just on the court. And the best part about basketball is it's a way to teach them lessons about life.
Man.
Like when things get hard, are you digging in? How do you handle success? How do you handle failure? Those kind of things. And then trying to make them realize how to apply that stuff, as they get older.
Absolutely. Let me plug in mine. Oh, there you go. You are basically hitting everything on the nose. Everything that you said is aligning, with the student of the game, and you're actually, generating answers to questions I had already had for you. So one of my questions would be, so what is it that you think that is missing? Often like you said, kids in general have to go through some type of experience to understand what you're trying to teach them, right? And I agree. With me being as hard headed and as stubborn as I was, I probably wouldn't have been able to receive information in the capacity that it needs to be received for athletes, like myself in the collegiate level to succeed in life. But this is what this program is designed to do. And this is what this podcast is for, is to shed light on, those missing gaps, those life lessons that, all of us need that are going to, help us succeed and ultimately in life. And so what do you think that is missing, especially in the collegiate world, as far as these college athletes needing to pay attention to so they can utilize the information and the resources that they have in front of them to help them propel themselves? Because it seems like what you're saying is that the athletes aren't listening well enough to this type of information and mentorship that they are getting on, this type of level.
There's a funny saying my dad used to have, and it was youth is unfortunately wasted on the young. And
Yeah,
but like when you're that age, I think that's part of growing up. Some people
right.
figure it out sooner than others. Some players that I've had get it and are more inquisitive. I have
Yeah,
some kids, that separate themselves because you could teach them something, even basketball wise, and not only they would try and master it, but they knew how to apply it into the game. Where other people, you teach them something, but they have no idea how it actually applies, or go back and do the exact same thing they've always been doing, even though they practice this other thing. And so
translation. Yeah.
yeah, so some of these, I think it starts earlier than that a little bit too. I'm going to back up a little bit because I think, Kenny Dillingham, the football coach at Arizona State, who's had a lot of success, he said some wise things that I really picked up on that I liked. And, when they talk about some of the stuff with like, the transfer portal and the NIL and all that. And he said, we don't have this isn't a kid problem. It's not a player problem. It's an adult problem. And I think
Mm,
one of the issues with a lot of adults that are helping mentor kids, whether it's their parents, whether it's their coaches or their workout person or all that, it's having a holistic view again, when now all of a sudden there's a great payoff financially potentially for some of these kids, but everyone, I've heard this from people like Steve Alfer, where they talked about, now that some of these kids, now they're 18 years old and they're supporting older family members,
yeah.
and so now everybody is so focused on that, or programming those parts in their mind. They're not necessarily mentoring them because they may have some other thing to, I need him to, this is my cash cow, this is an
Right.
opportunity. If he makes it, then I'm going to have him fund my AAU team, or, those kind of things. And so
Mm,
I'm not saying those are the only reasons, but those are problems that you have, and not always, these aren't, it's not one, broad stroke, but I would say that all these people need, we're all a victim to it. Sometimes you get tunneled into, all right, well, we got to focus on the basketball part. One of the things we did last year, we had our team went over to this beautiful uh, office space in La Jolla overlooking the water or whatever. And this company, I believe it was it might have been an insurance company. They had legal division of this insurance company, and they they had all our whole team over there. They did this whole presentation with all our girls there. They fed them lunch. They talked about what their company does, et cetera, et cetera. And their whole thing was like, we want to hire an internship. We want to hire an intern, and we would love to hire somebody within your team if we could, because we've had success with former athletes, and one of our girls took advantage. She wants to be a lawyer, so she kind of went and did some of the legal stuff, like a intern with their legal aspect of it.
nice.
But like she was smart enough to like, oh, light bulb on, these people, and how great would that be? Well, she's setting herself up. Now, she still had to work out. We had summer workouts. We had, she still had to lift. We had training. She just had to figure out how she could do all that and make time for that in her day too, and but I was impressed with the fact that she was smart enough to see that opportunity. And I think sometimes that's, just having an awareness for kids. I do think as a coach or anybody who's mentoring, you need to try your best to try and highlight those and put people in a position to where they see those opportunities. But in the end of the day,
Absolutely.
they're going to try and, they're also sometimes, like you said, sometimes you're going to be ready to receive and sometimes you're not. But I think our job is to
Yeah.
give them opportunities and to try and be consistent. I think our job also is to model those kind of behaviors. So anyway, I mean, I could go on and on, but I think
No,
that there's no
no,
question,
this is heavy.
but
This is great stuff, man. Go ahead.
I just think that, I mean, that's to me, I've been coaching for 30 years and our team, your freshman year, we set the tone for San Diego State for the last 20 years by winning the conference and the conference tournament. That was tremendous, right?
Yeah,
Honestly, for
absolutely.
me as a coach doing this 30 years, that was a great moment. And I'll never forget that moment. It was a great moment. But it's more important to me that you and I can have a conversation right now, that we can look back at our relationship and be at that
Yeah,
fond memory. That I have those relationships, hopefully I impacted you guys on more than just winning games right there, or that that even now today you could call me at any time and say, "Hey, coach, I need some help."
absolutely.
And maybe the help is what you're talking about. One of the things that's helped me in terms of professional development is like during COVID, I was in between jobs, and all of a sudden, it doesn't look like there's going to be even coaching jobs to have because of COVID. They're not hiring anybody. Well, I need a job. I got to support myself and my family, so I had to teach myself how to get a job, and so which I eventually got offered a job with a company, and it was Stryker, which is a medical device company, and I learned about it from Mike Montgomery, who's the Stanford coach. His daughter had gotten a job, as she was a former athlete, and they hired a lot of former athletes to sell med device, which is, it's kind of like the Duke of med device sales, really, to be Stryker. And but I was smart enough to
Oh, you were
realize,
telling me about that
right? So
the
this
last
was a
time we
company that I
talked.
was like, all
Yeah,
right, well, they hire former athletes, and they would see maybe more of my value than other companies who would say, well, you don't have experience in this particular field, right?
yeah,
But also, I had to learn, how do I apply for job? How do I get involved? How do I do all that? It's totally different than the field that I was in. And so, but it gave me great insight to be able to help other people. So that it has nothing to direct. It doesn't have to be directly basketball related. I could still help you in terms of understanding the process of how to get a job, and
absolutely.
that there's got to be a bunch of different ways. You can't just use networking. You can't just send your resume to apply on Indeed or whatever, but you have to develop a strategy for how you're going to do that, or finding out what are areas you're interested in. I think one of the problems is, with people fall into coaching that are former athletes because that's all they know. That's the only people you've been around.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
or you go, what else do you do? Or you default into, and most people do this, right? They follow in a family member's footsteps. Oh, well, my mom was an accountant. And so I always knew that. So then I would try and be an accountant because I thought that would be great. Those are some examples that people fall into. But a lot of times people don't even know what everyone else does. So I think
yeah.
developing a curiosity. Well, what is this? Or what do you do? Or what could I be good at?
Yes, that's it right there. That's the golden question right there. That's it. What can I be good at? And it piggybacks exactly what you said as far as, falling into those, not necessarily traps, but falling into those lanes of my mom was an accountant, not despite the fact that it may be against what I'm actually happy with doing. Right. I was thinking about this earlier today, and I'm gonna post it on social media, and it's like as a hooper, but not just a hooper, right? Because this is, basketball is just it's just a platform, and that's what student gaming is about. To shed light on that, it's just an opportunity to utilize as a stepping stone, to open up more opportunities and everywhere else. I got networking and relationships out of it. But I was thinking, like, as a hooper, you need to consider yourself as if you're in the university of life. A student of the game to me means to be a student of life, and basketball needs to be your major, and but then there also needs to be, like you said, that curiosity for that minor. What else could I be good at? Knowing that basketball is not going to be my forever, what else can I attach to or develop into my identity that's not going to just be basketball? What is it going to be? Like, what hobbies do I have? What interests me? What am I good at? Like you talked about, and utilizing that time while you're playing basketball to develop those other skills. Because as you mentioned, it's not easy to just go and get a job. You have to develop some type of skill, right? So I absolutely absolutely love that you said it. I love what you're doing because everything this is representing is to do that. You know, a lot of us go into this basketball world only focusing on basketball, and 80%, if not more, fall into the same trap that I did. And now we're lost. We don't know how to transition, and, we're not business savvy, don't have the financial literacy. And that kind of leads to my next question. And then we'll get into some D1 stuff. But, what is something that you think should be implemented especially with NIL deals? What do you think is something that student athletes should be learning as far as being and becoming financially literate?
Well, I mean, I think that's really important. But right now, the kids don't know. I mean, anything about how you'd pay taxes. They don't know anything about investing money. It's funny to me because I've had a couple of kids now. They're no longer kids, but guys that I've seen become very successful, in their post basketball life. And I really think that, like, the smallest thing, but it's such a big thing. It's like the people who are making real money are making money when they're not working, right? I mean, and
Yeah.
they're also people who are making real money. They use their money to make more money. They don't use their money to
Yes.
acquire, right? And
Right.
so, everybody right now, we're in the United States, especially, we're all taught to, like, okay, well, as soon as you get money, you first thing you do when you're a kid, oh, I want to get the nicest car. I need to pull up, and then all of a sudden, I need to have this name brand thing. I need to have that thing. So many of those things that are depreciating assets, but I think if you're smart, if you can ahead of time, you can figure out if you're going to come into a large amount of money, like, how can you use that money to make money? Now in California, it's even harder, but, like, if you're out of state, you're a student athlete, some of these places, the amount of money you make, you could buy your own, you could literally make enough money and buy your house while you're in college, or
Yeah.
you could buy income property, right? Or something that's going to appreciate. That would be just an example. And it's funny because what I used to, I remember well before we were doing this with where you can make money in NIL, but I used to try and tell all my former players is, like, I think my goal for you, most people, their goal is the NBA. My goal would be for you is for you to make enough money playing basketball that you never have to have a real job, right? And so if you went overseas, for example, where you may not make as much money, but a lot of times, most of the people, they're gone for 9, 10 months at a time. And if you make a good amount of money, if you're saving that money or you're investing that money, and you do that, let's say for 7 to 10 years, we're just throwing out numbers. But the idea was, like, you came back and now your investments are making money. And then you got time to figure out what you really want to do, because you're still can afford to live. Now, if you've been spending all your money on the latest and greatest car or things that are depreciating assets and all your money, then you get back, guess what? All of a sudden, when you're done playing, you're like, man, I need a job right now. Like, how am I I can't support myself, and da 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 da. And so that was kind of a goal. So I would say the same thing to any current athlete, like, I think what your goal should be with your money.
Yeah.
Like, could you imagine never having to have a job? Like, you might want one because you're something you're passionate about doing. You follow that passion, but you don't have to work. I don't know that I would say there's probably 1% of the population in the United States maybe is in that position. But you could do that potentially if you had the right mindset.
Man, that's good stuff. Man, that's good stuff. Wow. Those are gems. Man, again, I can't be
Old guys
more
know stuff.
grateful for
Old guys
those
know stuff,
responses.
right?
What's that?
I said old guys know stuff. It's just I think that's the life experience a little bit, and the wisdom and being around. And
Yeah.
the one other thing that I would tell you is that really helped me, and I want to share this because I think it would be good for anybody, especially when you're, interviewing for jobs and things like that. But something I learned when I was kind of I was kind of in this mode where, I thought I was interviewing for a lot of head coaching jobs, and you go to these different things you get invited to where they're really trying to help prepare you for interviews and things like that. And one of the things that I think correlates no matter what you're doing is knowing your core values and be able to speak on them. Okay.
Yes.
And I felt like, as I went back to what I was saying with those kids that interned, right? But any job now, and it didn't really resonate right away, but now it does. And if you know your core values, you can speak on them and know how they transfer into any job. But also
Exactly.
yourself, because, for example, right now, if you and I were going to do the interview, like you said, then it's easy. You can go and look up on Google search, and then you could say, all right, well, I coached here, I coached there, I coached here, right? So if I'm in an interview and, like, they say, okay, well, tell me about yourself. Or you say, okay, well, I coached at San Diego State, or I coached here or there. Okay, I know that. I have that on right here. But who are you?
Yeah.
Right. And so to me, that's really important. Right. So I'd say, well, I can define myself for me, I have 4 core values. Right. The first one's passion. Okay. And I would say, what's passion? Well, if you love what you do, it should show. Right. I always say, like, if the work is the reward, you're in the right place. Right. That's what we're talking
Mm.
about right now. It's like, do you find something you're passionate, gets you out of bed, you're excited about? Now, not everyone does that. Some people, what they're really important is that work and make enough money, it affords them the opportunity to do things they want to do when they're not working. But for most people, when you're first starting out, find something you love to do. Because if you love to do it, it ain't work. Right.
Yeah.
That's why I'm a coach. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. So then,
Absolutely.
the next one to me is grit. That's my other one, grit. Okay, and that's just like, I love things that are challenging anyway, and I love when things are hard, and I'm a very competitive person. And I would use that analogy for me. It's like, if you and I didn't know each other and we were running next to each other on the treadmill, I'm gonna try and go faster than you just because I'm that good, right? But it also means I have that stick to itness. I like those talent. I mean, I'm also coaching because I love competition, right? I love the preparation for the competition.
Yes.
But it's that gritty stuff. Like, you can't survive in my profession if you don't have that competitive fire and you're not gritty when things get hard. You know what right?
Well, can you survive in any profession if you're really trying to be great without that?
Well, you're probably right, but that my point is to try and find. That's why I'm saying this is who I am, and I'm trying to make
Yeah.
sure small in a concise amount of time. Right? You're going to have a half hour, 40 minutes if you're in an interview process. You got to make an impression. Who are you?
Yeah.
I like this guy, because my next one is accountability, right? And people might not ask that directly, but I'm going to say my word matters. If I tell you I'm going to do something, I do it. You said, "Hey, are you available?" I said, "Yeah, let's do it at noon." I didn't call you at 11:30. Say, something better came up, or I got to change it. Or I gave
Right.
you my word. I gave you my word,
Yeah.
and it matters. And I would
It
want my
does.
players to know. If someone would ask in a different way, what would your players say about you? If coach ever said he was going to do something, he followed through. I knew I could count on him. Now, the other side for me, I'm going to hold you accountable,
Of course.
right? If but I hold myself accountable first, but I'm going to hold you accountable. But I think as an employer who's in a job situation, they're like, okay, I want someone who can hold themselves accountable. I don't want to be babysitting people, but I need someone who holds themselves accountable, right? So I already
Absolutely.
answered that question for this person. He might not know that in an interview because he didn't ask that question, or he doesn't know how to get to that. But I'm telling you right ahead, okay? And then my last one would be servanthood. And that, to me, servanthood to me is like, I say, are you someone who's willing to do things for others without expecting something in return? And I think most of today is transactional. If I do this, then will you do this for me? It's very
Yeah.
obvious, right? That's not who I am. That's not how I was raised. My dad, I told you, we started off and he would bring kids out, and we had guys that go on to play out, all kinds of plays for a national championship, play at a high level, go in the NBA. He never asked for a dollar from these kids to do that kind of stuff. That wasn't what he
Yeah.
was about. He was about doing it because it was the right thing, and I was
Yep.
going to do the best for you, not what's. If I do this for you, this will help me, right? And I think, again, people want someone who's willing to do things like that. So to me, and everybody's core values don't have to be. You don't have to say those are the key core values. No, who are you? Yours don't have
Yeah.
to be mine, right? Yours might be
Of
different than
course.
mine. But you should know who they are and be able to succinctly describe that. And if you can, you will always be prepared when you're in a job interview, right?
Man, that's good stuff. That is good stuff. Talk about, this question wasn't, on my list of questions, but talk about how important accountability is. I believe that accountability, I speak about it, all the time. And it comes in a lot of forms, right? Holding yourself accountable for any of your actions, right? But talk about accountability and how important that is, just for success alone, to be successful on the court, to be successful off the court. Why is that important?
Trust.
Trust.
Right? Are you someone I can trust? Right? And, like, for example, if you're talking about on the court, it's the same thing. I need to trust you. Who does the coach play? The people he trusts. Why? I have confidence in them. I know what they're going to do. I always say you got to be an everyday guy. Who are you every day? Not who are you on your best day, and not who you are on your worst day. Who are you every day? That's who you are, right? And that's why it comes down to accountability. If you're someone who holds yourself accountable, I trust you're going to make good decisions on the floor or off.
That's heavy. And that was actually one of my questions. What is it that What is it that you look for in a player?
I mean, I just told you what I looked for. All those
That's
4
it.
things
All of it. I love it.
right there. A passion. I want someone who loves the work. If they don't, I tell them right now, if you don't love the work, if that ain't the reward, don't come. I love to do extra work and do that individual stuff, but I'm not going to beg you to do it. You got to want to do it. If you don't
Yeah,
want to do
man.
it, then don't come. You might be talented, but you're not going to. I'm not. We're not going to vibe. And my thing is work hard, play hard. So when I'm not working, I love to go do stuff.
Yeah.
I don't have a basketball poster. I love to surf still. That's why I like being in San Diego. So I have things I like to do, but I like to work too. So I was telling you, work's got to be the reward. I said accountability, grit. I need kids that are competitive. They got to have fight and toughness, right? It ain't just talent. You got to be tough. Getting stops isn't always about being more athletic. It's about wanting it more.
Yeah.
I always say, like, you
Mm.
can't. I said you could be tired, but you can't play tired. Well, what is that?
Yeah.
That's grit, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
And then
good.
servanthood. What kind of teammate are you? Are you someone who's willing to accept a role for the betterment of the team? If you
Man.
can't, and you're always going to be about me, and you're not going to be in with the team, well, then we're going to have a problem. So to me, I'm looking for all those things. I'm looking for people. That's my core values. Those are people I identify with too, right? We're going to vibe. I need people who are on the same page with me. So I'm looking for
Man.
that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that translates into my next question. Kids are trying to get a D1 scholarship. I'm assuming that they're going to need to have these type of qualities. But what does it take for a high school kid to get a D1 scholarship? If
You
there's
know, it's
any answer that's different from what you said.
it's harder than ever to get a scholarship because there's so many creative ways that people can attract players. Right now, you have kids that are transferring from not just junior college and coming in at high school, but now you're getting kids 4 years players, and it's a win now mentality as well because you're literally year to year putting together your team. And so, for example, we took 2 high school players. We signed 2 in the fall, but we won't take any other high school players this year. We're going to take kids that have proven at the Division 1 level, and so it's really hard. So if you want to ask me as a high school player, what is it going to take? You've got to really separate yourself. And I think
Mm,
scoring is one thing, right? You got to, it's just, you got to think of like in the NBA, the first part. In the NBA, it's like you have to have something that you do exceptional. What is it that you do, right? And you got and I got to see what is it that would transfer from what you do as a high school player to a college player, right? And it can't be just scoring, right?
let them
Because
know.
you
Absolutely.
know and so like it could be you got to be an elite rebounder, right? You got to be an elite defender, you got to be an exceptional passer. Frank Knight. Like there's so many different things that I could come up with like that, but I think 2 things. One, I think you have to have an incredible amount of self-confidence to be successful when you get there and to be a good player, right? Because everybody's trying to take your confidence, your own teammates, the coaches, the refs, all kinds of adversity, right? So you got to be mentally tough.
Yeah.
I think that part is really important. But I use this, I think playing hard is a skill. And, some people get it naturally, but most don't. They have to learn how. And if you can learn how to play hard, you'll find that you're going to do, when I was a player and I'd go to camps or I'd hear people talk and they'd say, coaches would say, you got to make a play. And I'd be like, well, that's so vague. Make a play. What does that mean? Well, as a
Yeah.
coach, it's very specific, right?
Yeah.
Because to me, what I would try and flip on kids, they always think, well, if I score, coach is gonna got to play me more, so I got to shoot because I got to score, otherwise he won't play me, right? If I score, he'll keep playing me. Well, that's actually to me backwards because
Yep.
what are you doing to help the team win
Th-
when you're not
There it is. That's
right?
it.
And
And
if you
that's
can
making a play.
there, right? Then you'll be on the court, which will give you opportunity to score. But if you can't remember plays, you're breaking us down. If you can't guard, if you don't, and guarding isn't just when you have the ball, guarding the ball. It's what are you doing when your man doesn't have the ball? Are you an elite? Can you take charges? Can you block shots? Like I said, rebounding is a transferable skill. Are you a great communicator? Are you a good teammate? Do you have good vision? All those things. But you've got to figure out what you can do to help the team win when you're not scoring. And if you can't answer that question, then you shouldn't be on the court. And I'm going to tell you this: goes back to the job world, okay? Because I think today's young kids, young adults, I should say, they think, well, if I go do this after 5 years, I'll get promoted. Especially if someone leaves, I'll just move up. But like, that's not what your boss is thinking.
Right.
The first thing you got to do is you got to make yourself irreplaceable. If you didn't show up for work the next day, would anyone know? Would anyone miss you? Do they need you? Are they looking like this person is really important to my success? If they do, then you're going to probably get promoted. If you can't answer that question, then You're not getting a raise and you're not getting promoted. They're not just going to give you money. No one's going to just give you a promotion. You have to earn it. And I think for most people, when you get promoted within, they don't realize like your audition for your interview for the next job it's every day. It's
Yeah.
every day. You're auditioning every. You want to get promoted? It's what you do every day. Like I said, be an everyday guy. That's who you are. And you got to find a way to make yourself really valuable. And if you can't, and if you didn't go to work for a week and no one noticed, you're probably in trouble,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. You're a product of your actions, not your aspirations. I've heard a quote one
Sure.
time. Um,
All right, you get me
oh
going.
man.
I hit right.
Hey, no, but please keep it going. This is phenomenal. This is phenomenal feedback. This is everything that I was, what I was wanting, and more.
This is what you said in the recruitment process too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So, man, and that's all of it's good. I can't wait to go back and listen to all of this, and to break this down because this is that feedback, this is that information that kids need to hear, and especially nowadays, it's you say it's harder to get a scholarship, and I imagine it's so with all the resources and the social media that people have access to now. And so somebody that is trying to get to that next level is going to have to be have to be different. Try to make a play, and I wanted to go back to that. And what does that mean? It is what are you doing to help your team win? And that's something that I wish I would have had more time to do while I was playing, because it takes the pressure out of quote having a bad game, right? Because you're always going to have an all night. But if you're going into the game thinking about how you're going to help the team win, it takes the pressure off maybe having to score, X amount of points, having to rebound, because now I'm able to facilitate or be of value in other areas that are going to help the team win. And it kind of boosts your value. So man, that is good stuff. And so,
Say on that too, Kyle, is it also you find yourself scoring more when you make other plays. The
man,
ball
and
finds you,
I
and
actually, I'm
you
trying to
look
teach
at
my
these
young
other
kids.
players.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was
It
just
would
saying the
broke up a
ball
little bit.
finds you. Look at like the Kobe Bryants or the Michael Jordans or the LeBron, but a lot of people like they go make a lot of other plays that aren't on the that isn't where they run a play for them all the time. They go and make a play,
Yeah.
whether they get a steal, they get a rebound, they get a, run the floor, get out behind the defense, get a deflection, offensive rebound, cut. There's just so many other ways. Find ways to make people foul you, and that you where you do that. But you're right, and I think what was interesting to me, especially as I've got older, and like I said, that's the graduation revelation, where it's all, you see this more clearly. But I what I miss when I go play basketball right now, I don't miss scoring. I miss competing.
Competing,
So
playing
when I if
at a
you
high level. Yeah.
so like right now, like if you were to go play pickup at 24-hour fitness, it wouldn't be much fun. You can go around, you can get a shot anytime you want, whatever. But that ain't fun because everyone there, you'd think they're going to get a trophy for how many points they scored that day, right? And it's whoever, right? Or they're going to post up. We're going to post in the picture your picture in the paper if you're the leading scorer at 24-hour fitness. But if you get a bunch of guys that all played in college together or played professionally, what they're all doing is they're all competing. That's the thing that they love
And
to do,
that's it.
and
Yeah.
how hard they play. Now during COVID, I coached in this 3-on-3 event. It was all former NBA players, and they were kind of playing with their NBA teams. It was in Las Vegas, and so we had these guys. They all had just somewhere within the last 5 or 7 years they had retired, and in the NBA, and these guys showed up, and I'm sure most of them hadn't really played to like a high level in a while, but they played so hard, and there was no, you're just giving them a little bit of strategy. There was no time when I had to demand they play harder. They all know how hard they have to play, and they love that part. That's the part that they miss. They just the competing, and how, like I was saying about, you don't, you can be tired but you don't play tired, and that is that skill that, by the time you get up to that level, like it's a given that you're going to do that. You just can't
Yeah.
survive if you don't. There's no one that you can hide that much. There's times when they're just like given space with NBA rules that, you just can't stay in front of someone because they're so elite. But in general rule, like the level of how hard they compete, and that part is, you wish that everybody wish they could figure it out ahead of time. That's why I was saying motor. Like any of these high school kids that really want, develop how hard are you playing? And I just watched one of my good friends, a high school team play, and he has some really high level athletic kids who are going to be recruited at the mid to high level Division 1. And that was my advice to them. You got to teach those kids, and you can tell them I said this, that they have to learn to play in multiple efforts, right? Like you got to be able to do more than one thing, right? You might give
Yes.
effort right here, but then now you're relaxing for another half the possession. You didn't fit, playing multiple efforts. And again, those are like a skill thing that they got to eventually learn. Like if you really want to be special, that's where it's at. But it's some people figure that out. Some people have that natural instinct and motor, and some people develop it. And I will say this too: some people get in their own way mentally in the basketball game, right?
Of
Because
course.
one of I found the people who usually have the best motor are the ones that can go to the next play. They don't dwell on the last play.
How important is that? That was definitely one of the
So
pointers that
if
I.
your mind is on the last play, or I'm not getting the ball, or I didn't do this, or man, I just missed this shot, and you're not into the next play. You got to be thinking about the next play. I love that Ted Lasso thing. Like, what's the happiest animal on the planet? He says goldfish. It's got a 10-second memory or whatever. And it's like, but that stuff really matters. Like, if you can be in the next play all the time and not to give that multiple effort, you find out if you're not thinking about the last play, you'll make the next one. If you miss your shot, you got to believe the next one's going in. That's what I was talking about, the self-confidence thing. But it's really the next play thing. And I think for young kids, sometimes they think when they're working on their game and they miss a shot, they got to be demonstrative, like make the shot, or things like that. Like that does not help you. You're just practicing that negative thought loop that you got to avoid.
My, that is so good. That is so good. You really
Like
just
what I would tell them, like, okay, well, could you imagine if your coach, when you shot it and you missed, and they said, make the shot?
right.
Would you want to play for a coach like that? And most of them was going to say, well, no. I said, well, why would you coach yourself that way then?
Well, that's so good. That's perspective. That is very good perspective. That is a clip right there. That is big perspective. I was thinking about this yesterday. I was coaching my son and some kids, and I think it's just a natural tendency for us to beat ourselves up for when we make mistakes. The flip side and the positive side is that as you can see the competitiveness and the will to want to get better, but it's a hindrance. It's definitely a shackle. It's an anchor
You got to
because, like
think
you said, you're
process than result. If you train yourself in the process oriented mindset versus the result mindset, right? You're going to
fall
get
in love with the journey.
right. And so same thing, like it's the process. It's like, just if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, the end result will happen. It's like, yeah, you want to make shot when you're working on your shooting on your own. Yes, you want to make a certain number, but the process, you don't get to carry that over. Hey, I made 10 shots or I made 100 threes, so that means I'm going to make. No, it's not going to guarantee anything. It's the process, right? And if you miss the next one, that you focus on whatever the process is. Okay, go to your two or three little things that your checkpoints of your shot, legs, wrist, follow through, whatever you have your own things, right? But you should be process oriented, not like, God, I missed that one. I can't make a shot. Like if you're training that, I don't care how many you shot, you're thinking negatively. So you're
Right?
not
And that's the
building
result you're going to get.
this is the whole point of
Yeah.
why you're working on your game.
Yeah.
You have to find the same thing. You got to find the fine line between being firm about things and demanding, but also you can't dwell on the negative all the time, right? You got to try and
Man.
start with a positive, maybe throw a little constructive criticism in there, and then end with a positive, right? That's what Steve Fisher would do, right? Kyle, you're too good to do that, son, right? Right? Okay, well, that was a different way of approaching it, to say,
yeah.
right? But that's mindset for kids individually. You got to develop that too. You got to be process oriented, because if you're not, I've seen way too many kids that they're too hard on themselves, and they think that that's what they're supposed to do, and then it becomes a conditioned response that they don't even know they're doing it.
Right. Becomes a part of their subconscious. Yep. This becomes a part of their reality and how they respond to things. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh man, that's good. All right. Well, I didn't, I got to prepare myself a little bit better. I got two more questions for you, man. This is good stuff though. Of all the players, the best elite athletes, players that you've come across, what was one or two things that they had in common?
Well, I mean, you said athletes. I mean, that's a little
Basketball players.
I would say
Okay, well, I mean, I think it's transferable. So let's say athletes, because I feel like, mindset is behind a lot of that. You talk about grit, accountability, and the core values of things.
I would say
So
like I was just funny because something that on my little like timeline thing popped up, and I had this highlight video of Gary Payton II, who played for me at Oregon State. That came up, and someone did this highlight video from him at Oregon State, and somehow it came up, and man, I was reminded just by watching that thing about just what, and he is an incredible athlete. He's an incredible athlete. But what really separated him was what I just said. He could make multiple efforts. So what Gary could do, and some of this was just his athleticism, but what Gary could do is he could go gamble like up at half court and try and steal a ball, and then the ball gets behind him, and he'd chase it down somehow and block the guy's shot at the rim. And I mean, like, I don't know how people do that. And he was a not when we would do a vertical test, it was not that impressive. He might have tested out at like 32 inches or 30. It wasn't that impressive. But in the heat of competition, I mean, you could add like a foot to his jumper. Just in
so,
games, he loved competition. He was not a great practice guy. He didn't love practicing. But if you made something competitive, he was elite, right? Now, the other part that he was exceptional at that I really enjoyed, again, this is kind of along the lines of what we were talking about. Like, he was a great leader, and how he led was he was a guy that he was a magnet. I think sometimes people think, whether you're a coach or a player, you think, okay, well, I'm going to lead by yelling. I got to yell at my teammates. I got to say, you guys got to do this, or you need to do that. And his thing would be like, with a freshman would come in the game with him, he'd be like, come on, big fella, we got you. You're good, and make you feel
yeah,
like, man, he make you feel good for being out there, instead of like some other guy who doesn't understand leadership, bring a freshman in the game. Hey, bro, just get out of the way. Give me the ball. Right. Or don't screw this up. I mean, you could go a variety of ways, but he just had a way of making everybody feel really good about themselves.
right. Encouraging, build them up instead of tearing them down, building confidence. Yeah,
Totally. Totally. Um,
absolutely.
So but again, if I were to go back to the people that had elite skills, to me, there's two things. The first one was they had a super skill. Alan Crabb, elite shooter, could really shoot off screens, and that is really what got him into the NBA. Ryan Anderson, who had a hell of a, I mean, was a stretch 4/5, but he also was averaged 12 rebounds a game in college, and to go with leading the Pac-12 in scoring. But his same thing. I mean, he had a super skill. Jorge Gutierrez. What was Jorge Gutierrez's thing, dude? He was disruptive. That's the best way
Yeah,
for me to describe it, and in the most complimentary way. He was just, man, you did not want him guarding you. He just knew how to take someone out of their game, and he just was relentless with that, and he enjoyed it. And he was just tough and gritty, and he enjoyed that part. But he got in the NBA, so they all had some sort of kind of super skill. I think other kids I've had other kids who aren't NBA players, who are good athletes, not great athletes, but become really good players, and their super skill to me was their ability to have a thorough understanding of the game, and how, when people taught them something, that they knew how to apply it. So at San Diego
translation.
State, Eric Sanders was a guy that was incredible, at just a sponge. And if you gave him something, he mastered it, right? When I was at Cal, Jamal Boykin was another guy who, I mean, and Jamal Boykin was plenty talented, but he was an undersized post. Same thing. I taught him how to do things like, this is what a wedge looks like on a rebounding, and very next game, he wedged two times and got a rebound and came down the court like, coach, that works. You're right. Uh,
Yeah.
Became a student in the game. He figured out, and I learned
Yes.
from him too. He figured out, as an undersized post, that he wasn't going to always be able to score just by being strong or bodying into people. But he developed the art of the pass fake. He'd pass fake at the beginning or at the end of his move. At the end, he'd get his own defender to relax. So he'd pass fake, shot fake, and kept everyone off balance. And then the scattering part was stay down. And no one ever blocked his shot his senior year. And he was very effective. But he just became a student in the game. He knew, but he didn't just pass fake in a game. Whenever he was working on his game, he worked on pass faking and being on balance and the pivoting and all. You know what happened?
Footwork.
I learned from him. I said, you know what? That's awesome. I love that. I'm going to teach the younger bigs how to do that. Right. When I was at Grand Canyon, we had a girl named Nadia Evans who, same way, we put a ton of time into the extra work. I call it pro time. And after her freshman year, she really did not have a great year statistically, and she had up and down in terms of her minutes. We actually brought her in and said, hey, your role might be less than what it is this year because we're bringing in some good players. And she went in the summer. We did all the work, and she went from being someone we weren't sure she would play to being our leading scorer. And she wasn't a great athlete. She was not the most athletic person on the team, but she figured out how to apply the things that we did. Now, I'm talking about offense, but I'm going to tell you, all those people were elite defensively. And they weren't elite defensively. They were all great athletes. They were elite because they were tough and gritty, and they were elite because they anticipated, right? And then they were really good help defenders. They would sacrifice their body. They would take charges. They knew how to do, they would get a loose ball. They would do all these other things that, everyone's natural inclination. Well, I'm not fast enough. I can't jump high enough. Okay. I'm not talking about
Limited
things
beliefs.
talent.
Yeah.
I'm talking about things that require grit and toughness, right?
Heart.
And that to me, so that's when, again, I go back to those are the core values that I'm looking for.
Yeah, man. Oh, man. Oh, man. I got one more question for you, then we got to wrap it up. That's all fire. One last thing. If you could give one piece of advice to help any athlete be successful on and off the court, what advice would you give them?
Again, I think it's a combination of things. So the one thing is be curious, right? You got to be curious. And then develop a passion for whatever you're curious about on and off the court, right? And really truly study it. I think some people fool themselves into thinking they're working hard when they may not, right?
Yeah,
And it's your level of commitment to it. And if you give it everything you got and it doesn't work out, well, then you have no regrets, right? It
exactly.
doesn't matter
That's
because
heavy right there.
but I think some people, they like to dabble, and then they like to play the woulda, shoulda, coulda game.
Yeah,
So, I do think, identify if I like to talk more about off the court because I think it's a more tangible, but if you can identify things you're good at and find different things that where you might be able to apply those skills, and some are natural. I have a really good friend of mine who's, in his early 40s, and he's kind of going through a career change and was trying to find a job, and he is an incredible networker. He is incredible with people. He has a way about him where he introduces himself to everybody, he knows everybody, and then he remembers them by name, and he just has a warmth about him it's a superpower. That's what I told him. That's your superpower, Now, how do you apply that into a job? Like, what would be the area that could be successful? Obviously sales, but what kind of sales? Because he has that personality and warmth about him that people will trust him, right? Because he'll do
yeah.
stuff like I was saying that those interns didn't do, right? So instead of me, if I was in the interview and I said, yeah, and what's your name again, right? Or if I said, hey, yeah, and you know what, Kyle, I blah 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 blah. Like, those are little things mean a lot,
It shows that you care. Yeah,
right? Or that I'm invested, right?
yeah.
And so
That you're listening.
that
Got
would be
it.
those
Yeah.
would be the things that I would kind of and then the last piece probably I would add in. We didn't talk about this, but for me, I really think it's important: organization.
Mm,
I think
structure.
if you're someone that's always in chaos, and I'm talking about everything, if you're not organized, you're not an organized person. Like, for me, like, I'm not the most organized person, but I'm relatively organized. But I know if I'm hiring anybody, I'm not hiring anyone who's not at least as organized as me, right? And so, like, I'll give you an example, just something small, but 15 years ago or so, I was at Cal, and I'm sitting with a young assistant at the time. He was at Harvard. Okay, his name's Adam Cohen, and we were up in his tournament in Canada, and both Harvard and Cal, obviously really good academic schools. Well, but those schools, if you like a kid, before you even investigate whether you want to recruit him, the first thing you got to do is look at his transcript, right? So I was sitting with him, and I said, "Man, I kind of like that kid, but I wonder what kind of student he is." And right away, he picked up his phone. He goes, "I tell you, I got his transcript right here." And I was like, "What?" And he showed me this thing. He's like, "Look, I got it in my Dropbox, and blah blah blah, organized. Boom, there's his transcript right there." Right? And I was like, let me see that. I need to see that. How'd you do that? Right? And next thing I know, I'm like, I
He
gotta
was
get
just
organized
prepared.
like that. Boom, boom, boom. And now whatever.
Yeah.
Point was, like the level of organization that mattered. It took the time to be organized, and in every aspect of your life, right? And I think if you can slow down when you're even when you're a kid, and start being organized, that really helps, right? I don't know if you ever saw this, Kyle, but there was a thing probably about 10 years ago. There was a I think a former and I may get this wrong, but I think it was a former Navy SEAL, like a very highly decorated Navy SEAL, I believe it was. And he spoke at the University of Texas high school graduation. You can find it on YouTube or whatever. And he talked about, all the things that he learned becoming a Navy SEAL or whatever, and how it related to kind of them going out and being successful after they graduated at Texas. And the
Yeah.
first thing he said was, if you want to be successful, you should make your bed every day. Right. And I'm paraphrasing, but he said, you should be
Yeah.
make every day. And he said the thought behind that with that is, one, it shows that you take pride in everything you do.
Yep.
Right.
How you do anything is how you do everything.
No question. And the second thing is, like, no matter what, like, you've already accomplished something. If you make your bed right, first thing
You
you've
start
already
off with the
accomplished,
win.
right?
Wow,
You
that's
start off with
good.
right.
That's
And he's like,
good.
and the worst possible scenario, if you had a bad day, you come home to a made bed, right? But like,
Yeah,
like
that's
there's
good.
something
This
about that, about
mindset.
being organized, right? And
Yeah.
the irony, like I was telling you, the guy Adam Cohen, who was at Harvard, young up and
Yeah.
coming, and you know where he is now. He's an assistant coach. I believe he's the associate coach, but I don't know that for a fact. But he's an assistant at University of Texas. So he went on and be successful and does a great job. But the point is just like, for any of these kids to realize, like, you don't those are things that you can control. You can control whether you
Yeah.
want to be organized or not, and it's got to matter to you, and be a detail oriented person. People are looking for that. People, if you got a messy desk, your office is a mess or your room is a mess, like, it's like you just live in chaos. Like, I can't function in chaos. I don't know a lot of people that can,
No, it's
and
not. Subconsciously, you can't. It's like you said. It has to. It has to matter. And I'm a victim of my organization skills. And as soon as we get off this call, I'm about to be better with it, man. But I have to stop us right there. I'm definitely going to be looking forward for a part two. My man, Greg Gottlieb, assistant coach for the women's basketball team at San Diego State right now. Phenomenal dude. Pleasure to have this type of relationship with someone that has given a lot back to the game. Check him out. I'm excited for this episode to come out. I appreciate you coming on, Sir Gottlieb. We definitely again have to get on for a part two. But man, you should start sharing some of that knowledge, man, with other people because that's good. Or you can just come on here and share it with me. That's cool too. I'll take all the credit
hey,
for it.
before we hang up, I've got to say one more thing. All right, because when I think of the beginning of our relationship, and I think back to recruiting process, and you know that most people, I don't know how many people know that you grew up in a household where both your parents were deaf.
Yeah.
And most unusual thing that I experienced when I did a home visit was that you had to translate back to your parents, but in realizing, like, how much more maturity you had to have as a young adult, being 16 years old, 17 years old, but also your grandfather and how much he played a role in your recruitment and all that. And, like, to me, man, you came from great stock. So
I appreciate that. I really do. I really appreciate that. And for us to be able to have this conversation and me to be excited about it tells a lot about your character as well, good sir. So, you're a huge part of my history, huge part of where I'm at right now. And I thank you for who you are and, the whole process of me coming to San Diego State. And couldn't be more proud to be an Aztec and a forever Aztec, man. And you
all
have a
right, well,
lot to
I,
do
I
with
got
that,
one
man. So I
last thing.
thank
You
you.
don't know this.
All right.
Ky- So when you visited, and this was when you could you took your official visit, but you were you had to rest your leg, right? Remember, you couldn't play for a while, and so
Yeah.
I just remember Coach Dutch. He said we had breakfast or whatever. He said, "Man, I hope he's good. This dude just had 2 omelets."
That's good. I love hearing stories like that, man. We definitely had to do a part two. I got to shut it down, Mr. Gottlieb. I got to get my wife in here, man. So I appreciate it again. And I'm going to keep in
Good.
touch. We're going to keep in touch. All
I
right, brother.
appreciate it.
Hold on. I got to stop it and then it's got to upload. So don't